Cathair Fionnúrach, or Cathair na bhFionnurach, is an instant cashel found in Baile na bhFionnurach in the Dingle Peninsula. It is also called locally Cathair Fionnúrach, which means apparently Fort of the Rings or possibly Fort of the Rainbow. It's not an isolated monument. Rather, it is one of a number of cashels and cluchons on the lower western slopes of Mount Brandon. Indeed, in this video, I will also talk about one of the other nearby cashels. It's not as visited as some sites in Dingle, though it deserves to be. It is also really easy to find by car or bike, or indeed by walking, by following the R549 out of Dingle for 12 kilometres till you reach An Bhóthar pub, a great place I must add, whether for a beer or sandwiches or even tea and coffee. Like many cashels, we have much more archaeological information about it than historical. Thanks to 2 excavations in the 1990s, we know a lot about it, but there do not appear to be any references to it in the historical documents. As was usual with cashels, it was in use in the early medieval period, which runs approximately from 400 AD to 1099 AD. However, during the excavations, some English coins from Henry II and Henry III were found. Indeed, the latter coins were minted in Dublin between 1251 and 1254. So, after most ring forts were abandoned, Cathair Fionnúrach may have still been in use, or it could have been abandoned and come back into use after some time. An interesting conundrum, one that will probably never be resolved. For most of the period it was in use, Cathair Fionnúrach was part of the kingdom of Corcu Duibne, from where the name for Dingle comes. However, as the work of Paul MacCotter and John Sheehan has shown, at this period Corcu Duibne included part of the Dingle Peninsula and almost all of Iveragh, as well as some of the intervening areas, such as where Milltown and Castlemaine are now located. It is probable that due to its location on 2 different peninsulas, this kingdom had a strong maritime vocation. It was divided into 3 trichets. This was the basic administrative division of pre-Norman Ireland. These were Eas Irush Tuaisceart, covering the south and west of Dingle, but east of Mount Brandon and south of Slieve Mish, and the other mountains running through the centre of the peninsula. It had no land border with the other trichets. The first of these was Eas Conkeen. This covered the centre of the kingdom, where Castlemaine, Milltown, Cologlan are now. Finally, Eas Irush Tuaisceart covered most of the Iveragh Peninsula, more or less from where Glenbeigh is in the north and Dunkerrin, just outside Kenmare, is in the south. The Ucongla, or the O'Connells, were the kings of the northern part, but they were largely overshadowed by the O'Sheas and the O'Falvis in the south. However, there was at least one Ucongla king of Corcu Duibne, Gael Mech Iblan, who died in 1040. The Ucongla would be pushed into the southern peninsula by the Normans, since in the early modern period they were the stewards of the McCarthy Moor Castle in Ballycarbery outside Carsafine. In turn, the Eonacht Loch Lane claimed lordship over Corcu Duibne. The Eonacht Loch Lane were the kings of Irmumu, or West Munster. Interestingly, all 3 of the leading lineages in Corcu Duibne, the Ucongla, the O'Sheas and the O'Falvis, claimed to be descended from this dynasty. While this may have been correct, it was not unknown for lineages or septs to invent descent from more powerful groups, whether for protection or to increase their own prestige. As may be guessed, in the 9th century, parts of Corcu Duibne came under attack from the Vikings, or better the Norse. Various monasteries in the kingdom were attacked. There is also evidence of attempts to settle by the Norse in the region. For example, near Milltown, they seem to have attempted to build a settlement called Dunmania, or Fort of the Main. This was sufficiently large that a coalition of Irish kings formed to fight it. These included Finnebra MacDunadig, king of the Ucongla, the Eonacht Loch Lane, and the king of Kerry, the North Kerry kingdom from which the county gets its name. Dunmain was probably in Rathmore, upstream from Castlemaine. Around 867, the coalition of Gaelic kings attacked it, comprehensively defeating the Norse, and afterwards capturing the camp and a lot of booty, including gold, silver and women. According to O'Coran, the presence of the latter indicated that the Norse had been intending to settle in the region. Their defeat and the destruction of Dunmania may be the reason that despite evidence of the north in various parts of Kerry, no large settlement was built in the county. While the kingdom of Corcu Duibne weathered the Norse, it was less successful with the disruptions between the 10th and 12th centuries. At the beginning of this period, the Eonach Lane went into decline, while in contrast, the power of another Eonach group expanded, Eonach Cashel, who would later become the McCarthys. The Eonach Cashel and the Dál Cash, later called the O'Briens, became involved in a very long struggle in Munster. The latter were generally more successful, pushing the McCarthys out of Tipperary into West Cork and southern Kerry. Here, the McCarthys created the Kingdom of Desmond. This obviously had a great impact on Corcu Duibne. As might be expected, the immediate outcome was conflict and instability. However, in 1124, the McCarthys seemed to triumph, exiling the king of the Eonach Lane, the king of Corcu Duibne, and others. But an even more powerful disruption was soon to come. At the end of the 12th century, groups of Norman adventurers landed in Ireland. In the early 13th century, they had reached Kerry. Geoffrey de Marais seems to have been granted all of Corcu Duibne. However, he never fulfilled his grant. The Normans were most successful in the north and centre of the kingdom, in other words in Éis Chumceen and Éis Iris Tuaisceart, Dingle, Cologle and Castlemaine, as well as numerous other places in the Dingle Peninsula and North Kerry, were all founded by Normans or became sites of castles. In Éis Iris Tuaisceart, the O'Congal were pushed out, being effectively exiled to Iveragh. Making a very complex story very simple, much of North Kerry came into the hands of the Geraldines, notably the Earls of Desmond, who held Dingle Town and elsewhere, such as Tralee and Castle Island, the Knights of Kerry, holding much of the rest of Dingle Peninsula, and the Fitzmaurices in North Kerry, notably Lishnau. However, the Norman advance into South Kerry failed. Here, the 1261 Battle of Callan stands out, in which Fionn McCarthy defeated Normans under John Fitzgerald, 1st Baron Desmond. Simplifying things again, Éis Iris Tuaisceart and most of Dingle came under Norman control. Éis Iris Tuaisceart remained under Gaelic control, namely the McCarthys, while Éis Chumceen was somewhat divided and fought over by both sides. The kingdom of Corcu Duibne flickered out, much of it held by Normans, the rest becoming the kingdom, later the lordship of Desmond. Thus, the ancient kingdom of Corcu Duibne is now largely forgotten in popular history and memory. Indeed, the name Corcu Duibne is now confined to Dingle itself. After outlining this history of Corcu Duibne, it's now time to turn to Cathair Fionnúrach itself. As mentioned, it is part of a series of cashels and clochauns on the western slopes of Mount Brandon. It's important to dwell briefly on this point. Too often, cashels and indeed other monuments are looked at in isolation, when, like all aspects of social life, they existed in networks or clusters. They also developed and changed, as all societies and social constructions do. Although Cathair Fionnúrach is not very high, it is well located with a brilliant view looking over the west of the peninsula. It consists of a circular wall surrounding the interior, which is dominated by a house with 2 rooms in a figure of 8. At the moment, the wall is up to 1.7 meters high and is between 2.8 meters and 3.6 meters in width. The fort's internal diameter is 25.5 meters. Undoubtedly, the wall was originally higher, perhaps much higher. At the moment, there are 7 sets of steps on the internal wall. Probably, these gave access to terraces around the wall, as can be seen in some of the other cashels in South Kerry. Drawings of it by Westrop from the beginning of the 20th century have 3 terraces on the east part of the wall. Only one now exists in this section. Probably the fort has been damaged since. Indeed, on the south, part of the wall was removed to facilitate a trackway. In addition, while the earlier drawing shows up to 3 chambers within the wall, only one now exists. Here, a low entrance leads to a room which can hold 20 people, or a group of people and animals. In addition, the remains of another chamber can possibly be seen on the southeast part of the wall. The gate into the fort, now a gap in the wall, is on the west. It is 2.2 meters wide on the outside, narrowing to 1.5 meters internally. Probably there was a wooden gate originally. Also inside there is a small ditch running around the interior of the wall. However, the archaeologists who excavated in the 1990s suggested that this may have been recent. As mentioned, the interior of the castle is dominated by the figure of 8 house, which has also been called conjoined huts. However, I like to think that it is a house with 2 rooms. The larger room is 6.5 meters across and originally had 2 hearths or fireplaces. These may have been used to heat it. A stone axe and anvil stone were found in the excavations, with the latter perhaps being related to a small iron smelting furnace pit also found there. The second room has a diameter of 4.5 meters. It is entered by a door from the first room, as well as having an external door at its rear. Also in this room is the entrance to the souterrain. This consists of a stone-lined pit, which leads to a number of steps, and then a ramp, which descends into an L-shaped chamber. However, access to the souterrain is currently prevented by an iron grille. During the excavation, the floors of both rooms were taken up, under which a large number of post holes were found. This perhaps indicates the presence of a wooden structure for a thatched roof, or indeed internal divisions. A double line of post holes was also found near the entrance to the souterrain, leading the archaeologists to suggest that a roof may have been built over it. In addition, before the house was built, the ground underneath appears to have been levelled with the use of what is technically called levelled boulder clay to produce a flat foundation. Moreover, as in many other cashels, the internal buildings went through distinct phases. A final interesting aspect is the filled-in remains of a cesspit. This is 2 meters by 1.9 meters wide, it's partially stone-lined, and contained a lot of organic remains, including grass and straw, which the archaeologists suggest may have been used as toilet paper. Various fruit seeds were also found in it, many native ones, such as apple or blackberry, but also imported ones such as grapes. At some stage in the early medieval period, grapes were thus being imported into this part of Kerry. A very interesting find. Also in relation to what was found during the excavation, many small artifacts were encountered, including coins, as mentioned above, spindle whorls, glass beads, iron slag, lead weight, and medieval pottery that probably dates from the 6th century. All this shows that not only was Cathair Fionnúrach part of a network of other cashels and settlement, it was also involved in other networks, involving trade and exchange, and possibly other things. Mediterranean pottery and grapes made their way to the cashel. Definitely something to think about. Finally, it's worth mentioning that east of the cashel are 3 ruined clochons. These are more or less in a row, and 2 of them are, quote, conjoined in a figure of 8, end quote. Furthermore, the historic environmental viewer also states that, quote, a direct relationship between the clochons and the cashel cannot be discounted, end quote. Moreover, around 130 meters up the road, or really the path, from the cashel, another one can be found. This is in a much worse condition and has not been excavated. Largely overgrown, it has an internal diameter of 22.1 meters. In other words, it's of a similar size to the other one. On the south, it is enclosed by a stone wall, which is now part of the present field boundary system. This wall is up to 0.6 meters high externally and 1.25 meters high internally. It is between 0.8 meters and 1 meter wide and is built upon an earthen bank, probably the original earthen bank. On the north, there is also an earthen bank, though this has dry stone masonry on its internal part. This bank is 2 meters high at the most and is not very well preserved. Inside the castle are the remains of 3 stone huts, all badly damaged. The archaeologists suggest that one of these, described as a sub-rectangular stone structure, is probably a later structure, possibly an animal pen built much later. The other two structures seem to be the remnants of original clughorns. Cathair Fionnúrach is a very special place to visit. It is small, unpretentious, and almost forgotten by history. However, the archaeology has shown us that it actually has a long history. It's quite possible that after most other castles were abandoned, this one was reused in later centuries. I hope it's been very interesting to compare the history of Corcu Duibne with that of the cashel. Although the former is full of gaps and fragmented, we know its rough outline. On the other hand, the cashel itself is something which almost does not exist in history, but which speaks to us in a very loud voice.